Today we are going to have some sauteed sagey lamb with a buttercup squash ragu over some pappardelle pasta. We're going to make up some pumpkin little donut holes that we're going to fry up. And then we're going to bake up a sourdough loaf. This is going to go for a friend tonight. And then we also have ours, one in the oven right now that will be done in just a second. We had a little spill over here, which no problemo. Let's get this guy off. I had him proofing in my refrigerator for the last 3 days, so he's on his last little leg here. So I'm gonna have to slide him off carefully because he's a little bit more stuck because he's sat for 3 days. But that's the beauty, is he'll bake up beautiful no matter what. There we go. Okay. This is the one where, remember the other one I made the other day, I didn't portion them out right when I was making them, so they're really big. Okay, we're gonna do our big kind of expansion score, and then we'll do our cute little wheatley. And so this is a pretty big loaf. That's why he was exploding out of my basket. Okay. We're gonna pop this guy, let me do one more little cut in here, into my nice hot Dutch oven that I've had preheating in the oven. So it's nice and hot. We'll slide him right over here. And let's see. I said he's a big guy. There. Okay, and then we're gonna put our lid on, and we're gonna bake this guy at 500 for about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna go to 450 for about 20 minutes. And while we're over here, which is gonna be perfect timing, because my pumpkin sourdough loaf that I have baking up is ready to come out as well. So, let me turn this guy off first, and then we're gonna grab my pumpkin sourdough loaf here. And let me, for just a second, I've got to set my timer here to 500, and then we're going to set it for 20 minutes. But here, I'm very excited. Everything's good and going. Correct? Yes. Always want to make sure. Okay, this is my pumpkin sourdough loaf with a pumpkin seed crust on it. So I had it baking up, so that we could actually probably do a crumb reveal. This has a full bunch of pumpkin in it. It has about 200 grams of pumpkin puree in there, with bread flour and some all-purpose flour, a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg as well. But it is just gorgeous and beautiful on here. And we've got a nice kind of golden brown crust. So we're gonna let that sit, and we'll be ready for that to cut into in a little bit. But while we're waiting, we can start, I'm gonna turn up my water here, and we can start kind of boiling up our noodles for our pasta. We'll prep up our meat. We'll work on making our donut holes while everything bakes. So we're gonna use some pappardelle pasta, which is a really big fat pasta noodle. It's long, think about like a really big fettuccine noodle. I actually really love them, especially with kind of rich sauces. A lot of times I'll do them with like a balsamic cream sauce with some braised beef. But today we're gonna do lamb with a buttercup squash ragu. So I'm gonna drop these nests in here. We're not gonna use the whole bag because again, we're just making, meals for about 4 today.
You have a question? What kind of pans do you use?
I have a mixture of the pans that I use. So for my nonstick cooking, I love the HexClad, and I have several of the HexClad pans. And then for my all metal pans, I use All-Clad. And I love these. I've had my All-Clad pan set for about 17 years now, so they definitely last and are great quality. Same with my HexClad. I've had them for 2 years, and they're still in really good condition, which is always a win. If they can survive me in the kitchen, it means they're gonna survive most people. Okay, let me just give these a little bit of a stir here. I just like to kind of, once you get them into the water, you want them to start to break apart for those little nests. We're gonna add a little bit of salt to this water because we're gonna be using some of this starchy pasta water in our sauce. So I'm gonna put in just a couple pinches of salt in here. And let's see. I'm trying to decide what we'll do. We'll prep our meat and then we'll work on our kind of our donut holes because those we're gonna fry those up. So I have some lamb roast left over from the other day when we made a lovely lamb tagine dinner. And I saved some, good chunks of this so that we can have it for, just another day. It was a really big lamb roast and I was like, oh, well, we don't need to cook up all that lamb at one time. Save this for a lunch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cube this guy up into just nice little bite-sized pieces here. And then we're gonna, drizzle it with some Worcestershire and some sage. I also have some fresh sage that we're going to use, but really simple spices because I really want that lamb and that sage to kind of come through because the sage is going to be a reoccurring theme in our pasta as well. Because I find with squash, sage just works really well with squash for that savory flavor and with lamb. So they all are kind of going to work together. And we're going to do kind of a creamy, buttercup ragu with like some brown butter overtones, garlic, sage, both dried and fresh sage, and some onions. So just really lovely. There we go. And then the lamb, I think, will just play up on it. Sage is a more earthy spice. And so and lamb's, got a little bit of that gamier taste, so it'll work well. Okay, we've got our meat here all chopped up. And what we're going to do with our meat, we're going to just give it a nice drizzle of Worcestershire sauce. The acidity from the vinegar in the base of this sauce is going to help break down the fat and lamb and keep it nice and juicy and tender. And lamb is a bit of a fattier meat, which makes it very tender. And then we're going to add in some onion powder, just a good sprinkle over. We'll probably end up using about 1.5 teaspoons. A little bit of black pepper, a good sprinkle over. Probably use around 1/2 teaspoon or so. We're going to do a good shake over of garlic salt, probably about 1 teaspoon. And then we're going to use some dried rub sage. And I'm going to use about 1 teaspoon over this as well. Our fresh sage we're going to use in our pasta sauce.
Yo has a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? That is the question of the day. It seems I'm not sure yet. I haven't gotten that far ahead to thinking about it. I've been kind of planning our camping trip and what to make for breakfasts during our camping trip. And then our first night there, so I gotta figure it out. Haven't there, but I do have ground beef in my fridge that I need to use up. I also have shredded chicken. So it'll probably be something that uses one of those, but who knows? I am going to be running to the store too, so that can also change by what looks good at the store. Okay, let's get these all kind of tossed up in their little marinade, and we'll let them kind of sit now and really let those flavors kind of soak in. Now let's start making our pumpkin donut hole type things, halfway between like a donut and like a fritter for this. So we're gonna start in our bowl. We need about 1 cup of pumpkin puree. Let me grab my can opener here. And I love pumpkin. I feel like when it's finally fall, I use it in like everything for about 1.5 months straight because I just love it. So we're gonna need about 1 cup of pumpkin, which is roughly half the can of it, or not half, I meant like 2/3 of a can. I always find that a can of pumpkin has about 1.5 cups in it. smidge more. Here we go. So we want about a cup of pumpkin, and I'm just gonna take what I visually think is a cup of pumpkin. Very precise, guys. And then we're gonna add in 2 eggs. One and 2. A 1/4 cup of cream. If you have buttermilk, you could also use buttermilk.
You have a question. What don't you like about pumpkin pie, and do you like other pies?
The thing that I don't like about pumpkin pie is the texture. I have this weird texture thing with pudding, mousses, yogurts. I don't like any of them, which is lots of food groups, but I really just don't like that texture. I know it's a little bit weird, especially because everybody in my family loves all of that stuff, but not me. I can do, like I made these pumpkin cheesecake bars, which we pretty much ate all yesterday. I can do those because I make a big crust, and so I have something that breaks up that like pudding type texture. And so that like doesn't bother me as much. But even like cheesecake at times can be too puddingy for me. But I like Jell-O, which is so, you know, I mean, it's weird. I said, you know, I'm an odd duck over here. But that's kind of the way. I love the flavor. I just don't like the texture. So, no real reason. Okay, we're gonna mix these. We got our egg in here, our eggs, our cup of pumpkin, our 1/4 cup of cream. There we go. And then we're gonna add in about a teaspoon, we'll do a teaspoon of vanilla. Give that nice kind of subtle flavor to it. And then we're gonna add in some of our, our spices and our baking powder. We're gonna do about 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice. Let me grab a little here to dry it off, or my spices will stick to it. So 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice. We are gonna toss these in a cinnamon sugar on there. You could also do instead of a cinnamon sugar, you could do a pumpkin spice and sugar mix. But I like the cinnamon sugar, it's a bit more mellow. So we've got 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice in here. And then we are going to do our baking powder. And we're gonna do 2 teaspoons of baking powder as well. So the eggs and the baking powder are what are gonna make these nice and light and fluffy. And then I'm gonna add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. There we go. Give this a good stir, and then we'll add in our sugar, and then last our flour. We just wanna add our flour in last so we don't get, over mixed with it. But I can already smell the lovely spices right away with that pumpkin pie spice. It just always smells like fall. Okay, so we've got these mixed up. I'm gonna give my noodles a little bit of a toss here. See how they're progressing. But again, I just love these big fat noodles on there. I still think they need another minute. You can kind of feel how they cling on, whether they're flexible enough. And then we're gonna add in 3/4 a cup of brown sugar. So you wanna pack it in. So that's a 1/2 cup. And then we're gonna do a 1/4 of a cup. We'll mix this in, and then it'll be time to add our flour, and that is the base of our thing. So super easy. And doesn't need a lot of, wash my hands. Let's give these a quick stir here. And I always like to say, add all of your ingredients in, but add your flour in last. That way you don't over mix it, because the flour, if you over mix it, you're gonna get a firmer donut hole. Okay, so we've got our lovely paste here. I'm gonna check my noodles because I think they're ready, which means I wanna reserve a cup. Yeah, they feel ready. So I'm gonna reserve some of the liquid because that's gonna be used to thicken up my sauce. and give it a nice velvety texture without having to use as much cream or whatnot. That starchy water is just great.
Oh, you have a question? Is a yam similar tasting to pumpkin, and can you sub that in?
So a yam, I will say they are pretty similar, but the problem is a yam is much more dense. So you would have to whip it with some like water to make it not as thick, because then it would mess with the density of yours. But you could definitely make like a yam or a sweet potato, kind of like, donut hole like this, but knowing that you're gonna have to change up the liquid content because it is a denser and it absorbs more liquid as well. Okay, we're gonna strain this real quick. Actually, let me pop this out first and then we'll strain it. And that way we'll have these sit and ready for our pasta. This right over there. We don't need to toss this with anything because we're going to be throwing our noodles into our sauce when we're done here. So we're going to keep it just like that. Okay, let's add in our 2 cups of flour here. And I'm just using all-purpose flour. You don't need to use bread flour or anything on this. Those will make them more dense. So we've got our 2 cups of flour. We're gonna mix these in until they're just barely combined. Again, you don't wanna over mix, or you're gonna get, instead of a fluffy, you'll get a stiffer kind of little fried donut hole. There we go. And it's gonna be a thicker batter, which you need to be able to drop it off in there. You don't want it to be too runny. So we're just about here with our pumpkin kind of spice donut holes. And once I've kind of got most of that flour mixed in, it's okay if you see a little bit, then I'll stop mixing. So we're golden right now on there. I'll just do one quick fold around. There we go. Okay. So we got our base here on it. For this, we're gonna actually slide this over here. Actually, better yet, let me grab a trivet so I can move that out of the way. So it's not blocking everything until we're ready to pop it up here. So in order for, I'm trying to decide which pan I want to use for which. I actually think I have smaller amount of meat. We'll use this one for our donut holes. I'm gonna heat up some oil and then we're gonna drop in little bits of it. I was gonna use the smaller one, but then I was like, that'd be lots of batches. Okay, we're gonna heat our oil up. You don't have to have enough oil in it that they're completely submerged. Now you can definitely do it that way if you want to do a deep fryer way of it. But I'm gonna treat this like I treat when I do my fried, like my fritters. You want it to go halfway up on them. So these are gonna be, not completely ball-like. They'll be more like round, fat, kind of thick pancake type balls. And then we'll flip and fry them on both sides for it. That way I don't have to use like 4 cups of oil. I can get away with like 1.5 cups, and I'm not wasting quite as much on here. So we're gonna heat this oil up. I'm gonna start it on high, then I'm gonna turn it down to medium, and then we'll kind of cook it over that medium heat. You don't wanna cook it too high or you're gonna burn it before it cooks all the way through on here. And also think about it when we're scooping this in, the smaller the donut holes are, the faster they'll cook off, versus if you make them really thick, then they're gonna take a lot longer to cook here. Okay, let's get ready for our pasta and our meat here. I'm gonna actually grab another pan. I decided, I changed my mind. We're gonna just use the big pan for my meat on here. Okay, to saute off, and we've got our ragu. Let's see. We're gonna saute off our meat. You know what? Scratch it, I'll just saute it off in my pasta pan. I don't even know where my brain is. I don't even need another pan. Okay. So we're gonna start saute this meat off, and I think I'll be able to fit it all in here in one batch, which is always nice. And then we're gonna use this to make our ragu here. So I'm gonna start heating
Final
it up.
chance. You want to use this pan?
Yes, this is my final answer. This is the pan I want to use. There we go. We're gonna put like a tablespoon and a half of olive oil in here. I'm gonna have it start heating up. Once it's nice and hot, then we'll start searing off our meat. We can take, he was not a winner, so he'll go back in. Okay, so we've got that. While we are waiting, I will just do a little conveyor belt mix around, and we can start prepping up some of our vegetables that we're gonna be using in our pasta sauce. So we're keeping it pretty simple here for the pasta sauce. We've got fresh sage, fresh parsley, we've got garlic. We're gonna use some onion and green onion, but I'm keeping it simple other than the buttercup squash, which I already have, that we roasted up the other day and I have in my container. That's gonna make the creamier base to our sauce. But we're gonna let that shine, so I'm not gonna muddy it with a bunch of other vegetables. So we're gonna cut it off. We're not gonna use this whole onion because again, we're just making a small batch. I always, like make our lunches for like 4 to 5 people. Since most of my kids are off at school. So we're just gonna start off with our small batch here. And we're just gonna use half an onion for this.
You have a question. Did you end up going with the stainless steel to sear the meat? Or could you have done it with either pan?
I could have done it with either one. My thought process was not necessarily on searing the meat, but I'm gonna be cooking my pasta in this pan. And so I'll be able to I can take my meat out and then we can use it to cook off our vegetables. This is a saute pan, which is great for sauteing up the vegetable or the meat. But I love it for pasta sauces because I can make my sauce base, and then since I have such a good lip, I can throw my noodles in and toss it. So I have this is the 3-quart. I also have it in the 6-quart when I'm doing like my dinner pastas, where I've got to feed a lot more. So that's kind of my thought process on here. So we're gonna put our lamb in here, and then it looks like our, our beeper is going off, and what we'll do is, let me drop these in here to start searing off, and then we're gonna go get the lid off of our sourdough. So I'm just gonna try to make sure each piece has a spot on its pan. Here we go. Beautiful. And now we're gonna go check on our sourdough. So we've cooked our sourdough for the first 20 minutes. Now it's the time that we cook it with our lid off. But 1 second before we do that. Since I'm stepping away, my oil is just about hot enough over here. I'm gonna slide it away so it doesn't get too hot while we're gone. Okay, so we're gonna take our Dutch oven out. We've got it baked at 500 with our lid on. I got my Dutch over here. Beautiful. I told you, even though it was kind of funky coming out, that it was going to bake up and be beautiful no matter what. I can always tell by the texture of it, like how puffy it is, whether it's going to be a good loaf or not. We're going to slide that guy in there, and we're going to bring our temperature down to 450. So we bake the first 20 minutes at 500, and then the last 20 minutes at 450. And then I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And hopefully everything else will be done when we get there. Okay. So, we've got our oil here. I'm going to bring this back over and let it start to kind of heat up on there. Oh, let's get this 1 second here. We've got our good saute, and then I'll pull that back on there. So we're going to flip all of this over. And you're going to get this nice sear on the other side. Then we'll check our oil because I don't want it to get too hot when we drop our pumpkin in, because I want it to cook over a nice medium heat. There we go. with the lamb here, we're gonna saute it off on the side. I want it to be cooked to about, you know, a medium rare, so we're still gonna have definitely that nice pink inside, so it's nice and tender over there. Luckily, I will say that lamb is much more tender than like a beef, like a chuck roast, so this always cooks off really lovely. Let that go there. We'll slide this on. We'll do our little drop of water. Pretty good sizzle, which means we're nice and ready. So I'm gonna turn it to about a medium. Not too much of a sizzle there. Now with this, you're gonna drop in little ball size for this. So it's the best to do it with 2 things. Remember like old school cookie dough where you would use 2 to kind of fry it off? That's what you're gonna do right here. Is you're just gonna scoop the ball in here because it's a sticky dough, so you can't roll out your shapes. Because if you made it any denser, then the pumpkin, it would make it too dense to eat. So this keeps it light and fluffy on the inside, but you're not going to have the most perfect holes, but they're pretty good. And these aren't going to take very long to cook on each side. That's also the beauty about it, that these cook up pretty fast here on there. And kind of pop one more in, and then I think our first set might be ready to kind of flip over here. I'm going to use a slotted spatula and tongs to help me flip these over. Beautiful. Look at that. Just gorgeous fry on it. So perfect and golden. And just got to remember which order I put them in to flip them. And again, this is a pretty light and fluffy batter because you've got the eggs and the baking powder in here. So it cooks up pretty quickly. It poops up. So they've already, like, when you drop them in, they're much bigger in size than when we put them there. Beautiful. So these are gorgeous. Again, I'm frying them over about a 3 or a 4. You want to go lower instead of higher because higher you're going to get kind of have it like too burnt. Okay. I'm going to turn my meat off here since we're just about done, and I'm going to grab 2 bowls here for this. We're going to pull our meat off here in just a second, but I'm going to mix together real quick some sugar with cinnamon so that we can roll these in it. And let's see how we're doing. We're cooking beautiful here. Yeah, they're so good. Beautiful. So we're gonna pop our sugar in here, and then I'm gonna take them out and we're gonna toss them in our sugar.
You have a question? What oil do you prefer?
I typically use olive oil for everything because that's what I use in like everything. So I don't have to create so many different ones. Let's get this stirred up, and then we're going to pull these guys out. You just want to have your cinnamon and your sugar mixed together. I use about 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon with about, I want to say 3/4 a cup of sugar. Beautiful. So look at this nice golden brown fry on these. Beautiful. And you want to put them in here right away because this will allow, we'll toss everything and it will allow the cinnamon sugar to stick on it. And then we'll get our next batch going. Perfect. Okay. We'll toss these. Beautiful. You could also throw these in a much bigger bowl, but I find you only do so many at a time. Let me grab my meat out, and then we'll drop our next batch in there. On there.
You have a question? Could you drain the donut holes on paper towels first?
The thing is if you put them on the paper towels first, your cinnamon sugar is not going to stick on it. You kind of need that hot oil on there to get you the nice kind of flavor, like the cinnamon sugar to stick to it. Okay, we've got our base here. Don't worry if you have little brown bits stuck at the bottom of your pan. That is essentially your onion powder that we have stuck there. When we deglaze our pan with our starchy water, that will all come up and make a really delicious base to our sauce. So I'm gonna add my onions in here, and we're gonna start to kind of saute them. As you see, as they're picking them up, they're giving this nice kind of golden brown color. So it's just because it's all stuck on there. And those are gonna actually add a lot of flavor to your like end sauce. So don't switch pans, don't do something else. Putting it there, we're gonna get that nice kind of lamby flavor in it. Let's get these next guys dropped in here. There we go. And again, I don't like to make mine too big, because if they're too big, you have to fry them for a lot longer, which then you risk getting them too overcooked. So I just find your large, little like soup spoon is a perfect size. You could do them smaller too, but then you got to do more work. But they do puff up in size, so even though you're dropping, a smaller kind of base in here, they do get to be a really good size. Beautiful. Okay, let's get these finished, and then I'll switch them over to another plate. But I want to just toss them all in here. Look at that. And you see how if you were to put them off, you wouldn't get that cinnamon sugar to stick on them. Get these out. So we've got our first round of our pumpkin donut holes here, or halfway donut hole fritter, whatever you want to call them. And those will be ready for us. I'm going to give my onions a quick little stir here. And then we're going to flip our bases in here that we have. Okay, I'll go to my first one. Beautiful. On here. And again, a slotted spatula really works well to flip this over, because it allows your grease to kind of fall through. And then you're just tongs to help you out. But again, lovely golden brown. And remember, our batter is darker, so our fry is going to look a little bit darker. Okay, let's see. We've got our onions caramelizing up in here with those little meat drippings on here. Again, when we deglaze our pan, all of that will slide off and add just a really great flavor. I'm gonna grab a handful of garlic cloves here and mince it up. This is gonna be about a tablespoon of garlic. We've got a really simple kind of sauce base here, so the garlic is going to shine. So we definitely want it. Oh, we lost a little bit there. That's okay. We'll get this a good mince up. We don't want to have any really big chunks in there, or you're just gonna hit like a big bit of garlic. So just mince it up nice. You could also use just a spoonful of garlic if you wanted on here. But since this is going to be a strong flavor profile in our ragu, I was like, let's use our cool new cloves that I found. There we go. Get these nice and minced up. And we'll toss them in to kind of toast up. And then we're going to add in some tomato paste as well. And then we'll add in our our roasted buttercup squash. Here we go. And these are going to just toast up in here for just a quick, minute or so. You don't want to cook them too long. I always like to kind of really move them around our little bits over here to get this nice kind of meat drippings off, I will say. There we go. I'm going to wash my hands because I've got a little bit of a garlic flavor on them before we work with our little donuts over here. You don't want garlic and pumpkin spice together. Let's see how these are cooking. Beautiful. So we're going to just drop them off in here. little bit longer. That was my last one in. I'll start spooning these guys off. Beautiful. So we've got our next ones, and then I'll toss them once I get these in there so that we've got our donuts covered in our cinnamon sugar. You could also, I'm using just good old cinnamon sugar, but you could use powdered sugar as well for this. And then instead of cinnamon, you could do pumpkin spice if you wanted even more of that little flavor to it. Okay, let's see how it's much better. Okay, now these are very hot, so for the first few minutes, I wouldn't recommend biting into them for at least a couple minutes so that that oil, any pockets of oil, can cool down. And same with it, you don't want to necessarily start touching it until it's kind of cooled a little bit. Here we go. And I always recommend, we're not going to use all this cinnamon sugar that we have in here, but you want to have more than enough, because when it gets down, if you have too little, you're not going to be able to coat it. Okay. Let's get ours. Beautiful. Now we're going to add in our tomato paste here. Now we don't want a big hopping tablespoon or so. This is going to add a really acidic note, and it's going to add some great flavor here. Make sure you scrape it along those tasty bits on the bottom of your pan to add in some more flavor. But as we add this pasta water in, look, it's all going to lift off, and it's going to make this kind of amber colored sauce. Beautiful. And that's why we call those little meat drippings, or your toasty little bits. They add a lot of flavor, and they come right up with a little bit of sauce, or a little bit of water, I should say. So we've got our tomato paste in here, toasting up with our starchy water. Beautiful. We'll add some more of our starchy water in just a second, but just you see how it's giving it this lovely kind of golden brown color for it. Now we're gonna get our buttercup squash that I have roasted up. We used part of it the other day to make our buttercup squash little like mini loaves, which were fantastic. The kids ate them up super fast. I have about a cup or so left here. So I scooped it out. So this is not butternut, this is buttercup, which looks kind of like a green pumpkin, like a short, fat, artisan green pumpkin. Its texture is similar to a pumpkin, but it's like halfway between a like a butternut squash and an acorn squash. So we're gonna mix this in with our tomato base here. And again, we've got this kind of deep, rich color to our ragu. We're gonna add more liquid to it to thin it out, but we want it to simmer up for just a little bit first. Beautiful. And for that puree, I actually didn't blend it. I just mashed it with a fork and a little bit of water. So it's a pretty, like a thicker paste to it. Here we go. Let's get these flipped. Cracking on me there. Let's see, are you ready? Perfect. We'll let those fry up on that side as we get going here. And before we add in more liquid, we're gonna add in some of our sage. We've got a dried sage. We're gonna add about a teaspoon. But I also have fresh sage right here that we're gonna throw in as well. So we're gonna mince this up, and then we're gonna throw it in there with our little stewy veggies. We'll add in our green onions and our parsley at the very end. I do want my sage to get cooked a little bit. So we're gonna mince this up nice and fine, because sage, if you've ever worked with fresh sage, it has a bit of a like tough, like a fuzzy texture to it. And can be a bit chewy too. So I always like to, mince it up nice and fine so it gets rid of that texture. And then we'll toss this in here with this. And now we'll kind of mix it all together and let it stew up. I'm gonna add in the other half of my pumpkin, or my starchy water into my buttercup squash here. I always want to call it pumpkin, but it's not, because this is such an easy recipe where you could add in pumpkin and use it. There we go. And we're also going to be adding in cream as well to give this a really rich, kind of creamier texture on there. So this is gonna have about half a cup of cream in here to give it. But we want this to stew up with those spices first.
Good question. Do you have any recipes posted?
I do have recipes posted for our members. I think we just posted 4 earlier this week. And I love to send out a couple of those from the recipes we cooked during the week for them. We do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so you can definitely rewatch and recreate these recipes from home as well. Let's see. I think they might, yeah, they're still a little golden, so they still need a little bit more time over here. But let's get, I forgot to grab out my chicken bouillon that I want to toss in here, so let me grab that real quick.
You have a question? Are you going to be on for dinner or are you leaving for camping?
So we won't leave for camping until Sunday, kind of early afternoon. So we will be on for dinner tonight, and then of course tomorrow. I think we might even do a late night tomorrow night because I've got a lot of stuff I need to prep up for our camping trip. I make a lot of little snacks like Chex Mix and little treats that we bring along with us camping. Okay, I added in about 1.5 teaspoons of chicken bouillon. This is gonna help give a really nice savory flavor to it and a little bit of a salty kind of texture as well. So I'm gonna give this a good mix up on here, and then I'm also gonna give it a nice little taste to see where we're at as far as flavor profile wise. That's actually really good. You can taste that sage in there, but with that squashy undertones, it's really flavorful. I actually thought I was gonna need to add more salt in, but it is actually perfect. Okay, I'm gonna turn this up just a little bit more since we're kind of cooking on a, the more you do, it kind of brings the oil down on it. That should be good. Okay, let's get these in. And then we'll put our last little bit in here to fry up. And then I think our bread's about to come out of the oven here, and then we'll finish up our sauce because once we add in our cream, we toss in some green onions, parsley, and our ragu, and we've got it all done. Okay, let's get our last one. Sets of these in here. So we'll drop these guys in. So this makes a good amount of, donut holes / fritters, beignets almost, except they're not a yeast dough. So it makes a good amount. They go fast though because they're so good. On here. Let's get this last little bit. I think I can scrape the bowl to make one more because waste not, want not.
You have a request. Can you go over the batter for the donuts?
Yes. So it's actually a pretty simple batter. We started out with 1 cup of pumpkin puree. Then we added 2 eggs, 1/4 cup of cream, whipped all those together. Then we added 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 3/4 cup of brown sugar. Mixed all that together, and then we folded in 2 cups of flour to give the base of it. Don't overmix because you want to keep it nice and fluffy. And then you fry them and toss them in cinnamon sugar.
You have a question? Where are we going camping?
We are going to Gatlinburg. We're gonna go to Dollywood, Anakista, do some hiking on there. But let me stir this real quick. I put in about, I want to say like 1/3 cup of cream. We'll see if we need any little more, but I want to get a quick stir. We'll let that saute. Let's grab our sourdough out of the oven here. Make sure I need to grab a pot holder. I used a lot of pot holders today, so I'm going down, running down. Okay, completely turned off. And then this is our beautiful loaf. It looks gorgeous. This is our traditional loaf. This I'm actually sending off to a friend, so I'm always glad when they turn out well on there. So let's get it flipped out, and we can finish off our lunch here. Oh, and I gotta toss these donuts over here as well. Okay, the one thing when you are making your like Dutch oven, like taking it out of the Dutch oven, make sure you don't just leave it in there to cool off. You want to remove it because otherwise it's going to continue to cook the bottom, and you want it to be just nice and golden brown. But here is our beautiful loaf here. He was a really fat one, so he was tucked in there. Pretty big, but he will be delicious. We got our nice expansion of our pretty wheat leaf design. And then we made a smaller pumpkin loaf here earlier that I baked up that has about 200 grams of pumpkin in it with a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg and then of course flour and all that jazz. So that'll be delicious, and a pumpkin seed crust because you got to. Let's see if these guys need flipping. I think they still need a hot minute. Yep. But let's get these guys tossed and our last bits of cinnamon sugar here. Now, old school, if you actually have paper bags, if you throw your cinnamon sugar and all that in a paper bag, and then you throw your donuts in there and you give it a good shake, that is like the old school best way to coat them, but I just never have paper bags anymore. You know, you used to always send kids off to school with their paper bag lunch. Now we've got all these fancy lunch boxes and grocery stores. You know, I shop at a Costco a lot, and you don't get any bags with Costco. Here we go. So we've got those sitting out. Our sauce, we are just about ready. Look how beautiful, rich, and creamy it is. This is our buttercup squash, and we already have onions and garlic in there and some fresh sage. Let's chop up our green onions and our parsley so we can toss that all in there, and then we can put our Parpendel noodles in. And then of course our lamb. Here we go. So we're gonna just slice these up. This is gonna add, again, that nice kind of fresh onion flavor. I will say I love doing really savory flavors with squash. I feel like the sweet flavors get overdone. So having nice savory ones, I think, is always a breath of fresh air. And then we've got our parsley. I picked these from the garden. So we'll mince those up. There was like a big spider web right there, and I didn't have the heart to disturb it. So I was like reaching through the spider web to get my parsley, and I'm like, I just need some.
You have a question? Did you go to culinary school?
I did not go to culinary school. I just have been cooking for a really long time. I started cooking when I was 13 years old, like taking over family meals for that, and I have just always loved it ever since. Let's get these guys flipped over here so they can start cooking up on their other side. Oh, beautiful. Perfect. And I will say, go low and slow when you fry. Doesn't matter what you're frying, low and slow so that you don't burn it and you give time for it to cook all the way through. Because you can cook it on high, but if you cook it on high, then what's gonna happen is it will look done, but you'll bite inside and it will be under, or it will still be doughy inside. Okay, let's throw in our green onions here and our minced up parsley. Give it a little thing, and the nice thing about this is always gives it a nice little pop of green as well. And then we're gonna toss in our Parpendel noodles once I wash my hands of all of this parsley on here. But we have our Parpendel, and they'll be stuck together when we first toss it in. But once you start mixing it with your sauce, which is why I said don't coat it in extra oil or whatnot, we'll just toss it in our sauce and they will start to break apart. So let me grab my tongs here. And we will get those tossed. There we go. My husband's stealing all the lamb before. He's like, don't put it at the squash. I want to eat it first. So just give it a good little shake in here, and these will start to kind of break apart on there. A lot of times I feel like growing up when you would make pasta, you would coat them with, you know, butter or noodle or oil, but then your sauce isn't going to seep into these flavors. So I never do that because I want them to really seep in. And all it has to do is just get a little bit wet in between and they'll just break apart right away. Or you could always cook them at the same time and have them ready, but I don't have enough burners on my stove to do everything. So, beautiful. Now we're getting it. But you see how just rich and luscious this sauce is? It's a really wonderful sauce. And that has that nice squashy notes to it, but is very, very savory as well. Beautiful. So we'll sit there. Let me check my little donuts over here. Let's see how they're cooking. Pretty good. They're almost done for our last little bit. Okay. We're going to toss in our lamb. I'm going to save some of the lamb to the side for it because my husband just likes the lamb on its own. So we'll toss it in here, coat it up with this nice ragu. But I will say lamb and squash really complement each other well because they're both that, you know, earthy flavors, and they work well, especially with the sage. Beautiful. Okay, we've got that in there. Perfect. And now we're going to be just about ready to serve everything up. I'm going to turn my sauce off because it doesn't need to cook anymore. Perfect. Let's toss these guys in here. And I always say, see, we don't need to use a whole lot of oil to get these all fried up and have, oops, dropped it. A little bit of a wonderful toss here. Okay, turn my oil off as well. Let's coat these guys up. Then I'm gonna grab our plate and we will be ready to serve up. Perfect. And again, you want to kind of drop them in here while they're nice and hot with that oil so that the cinnamon sugar sticks onto it. It may look like brown sugar right now, but it is actually cinnamon and sugar on there. But look at these. Tossing up wonderfully. Perfect. So here are our pumpkin spice donut holes. I'm gonna go wash my hands and then we'll grab our plate and it will be time to eat. Okay, let's actually grab a bowl because we're having pasta. Slide this over here. And of course, let me slide this guy out of the way. What I always put with my pasta, guys, is we're gonna have some freshly grated Parmesan cheese because it just makes it so much better. But this dish, it's so simple, but it has a lot of complex flavors, so it will be amazing. Okay, so we have our buttercup squash ragu. We used Pappardelle noodles, but the sauce, we sauteed up our onions and our garlic and then we sauteed up our lamb chunks with sage, and we made a lovely sauce using buttercup squash puree that we roasted up the other day. We've got fresh sage in here as well as green onions, putting in some of our nice delicious lamb chunks here. We added some cream to the base as well as some tomato paste to give it this kind of rich, kind of dark amber color to it. And of course we got to grate over our fresh Parmesan cheese. But it's a very savory, creamy pasta that is going to be absolutely amazing and taste like fall in your mouth. And then of course for dessert we have our pumpkin fritters or pumpkin donuts that we fried up in here that are going to be absolutely amazing. They're soft, they're covered in cinnamon sugar. And then we baked up our 2 loaves. We've got our traditional loaf and we've got our pumpkin loaf that I'm going to cut into because it has had time to rest so you guys can see how beautiful the crumb is on our loaf here. But look how beautiful this pumpkin sourdough loaf is. It is just amazing, and I can't wait to dig into it. It's got pumpkin, and it's got a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg, so a slight sweetness. I think it's gonna be perfect with the honey butter. It'll be so delicious. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link and search for what we made. So we've got our buttercup squash ragu with our pumpkin donut holes, and then we've baked up our sourdough, so we've got lots of delicious things on the menu today. So you can always go there, check it out. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. So I've got my pans, my hex clad and my all clad pans, my cutting boards, all that jazz. I've got it all in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much